What is up, fantasy fans? As always, I'm Shay from the channel Zachary Shay, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the different books, comics, and manga I read during my first semester of nursing school. Technically, I'm a junior pursuing my bachelor's. Anyway, the course load was so much, and it was very difficult and arduous for me to keep up my GPA. So a lot of things slipped. Reading slipped a little bit. I ended up reading some comics more than I usually would, just because the workload was so daunting that, like, on top of that, reading 800-page fantasy books seemed even more daunting. And so I read a lot of comics. I listened to a lot of audiobooks, but I was still able to read about 22 books, including like Shakespeare plays and like 10 or so comics. I want to say like 3 or 4 manga. So I'm going to review the books first, and then the comics and the manga, and then I'm going to talk about what I hope to read during my break. So I go back to school shortly after Martin Luther King Day. So I probably won't do a dedicated January to be read books of the month list. Just know that these will be the books that I'm reading throughout the entire break. So I'll be covering more than I usually would. But me, usually my eyes are bigger than my stomach. So I'll probably put more on here than I'll be able to fit in. But that's what it's all about. That's the fun of it, is trying to fit in more. So first up, I have, and this one's kind of sad for me because I know a lot of people love it, but I read Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. And I don't know if it was just the Shakespeare fatigue I was feeling at the time, or just the hype around A Midsummer Night's Dream. I had a similar experience with The Tempest. The Tempest is one that's talked about as one of Shakespeare's best. And when I got to it, I was just kind of like, that's kind of how I felt about Midsummer Night's Dream. But then there's some that have been, adequately hyped that I love. To an example, Macbeth, Hamlet. I love Othello. Othello is my favorite Shakespeare play by far. And not gonna lie, I hated Romeo and Juliet in high school. I actually really love Romeo and Juliet now. But yeah, I read Midsummer Night's Dream. It was interesting to see, names like Lysander and stuff. I'm like, oh, that's where Pierce Brown was getting it from. And, like Hippolyta, which is, I only know her as like, when I think of Queen of the Amazons, my mind immediately goes to like George Perez Wonder Woman. But it's like, okay, we have Queen Hippolyta, we have Theseus, the dreamlike state with these different mythical figures in it. It was a lot of fun. It was a fun read. It wasn't a bad read by any means. I think it was just a victim of the hype around it. I was expecting more, but overall I'd give it like a 3 stars. It wasn't, a terrible read. So yep. First is Midsummer Night's Dream. And next I want to talk about a book that I checked off from my library called The Damned King. I have Justin Lee Anderson's first 2 books. The Lost War, which is brilliant, and I think it is a great read. The Bitter Crown, which I didn't like as much as The Lost War, but I still really enjoyed. The Damned King, unfortunately for me, most of the book did not work as well as the other 2. The beginning I loved, and the ending I loved. It was just the area in between that I was struggling with being in the shoes of the characters. I was struggling with finding out what the stakes were for each individual character, and that was kind of rectified in the end. So I'm excited to get to book 4, but overall book 3, Damned King, was not my best reading experience. Again, not a bad book. I didn't read any bad books. Like with the massive course load, if any of these books were bad enough, like for me, Cormac McCarthy, like I would have just dropped them. But yeah, so my 21 is The Damned King. All right, and next up, super ironic that these are right next to each other, but after The Damned King, I have The Talisman by Stephen King and Peter Straub. So this book is in a weird spot because the highest highs of this book beat out a lot of the books above it, but the lowest lows are lower than the 2 books I just mentioned. Like The Talisman is the most all over the place book on this list. It has really high highs and abysmal lows. But at its heart, it is a retelling of the next book I'm going to talk about, which is The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And just like The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, this is the story of a young man. I believe his name is Jack Sawyer. Yeah, his name's Jack Sawyer. And I believe the follow-up, Black House, is going to be the story of an adolescent, much like how Huckleberry Finn is. So I plan to read Huckleberry Finn and then read Black House. And I also really want to read James. So yeah, Tom Sawyer, great fun, good book. give it like a 3.5. I give the Talisman like a 3. 3 to 3.5. Again, none of these are bad books. They're just not that, like, this is one I'm glad I read, but I would not recommend widely. This is one I would recommend widely just because of the impact it has had on pop culture and on literature in general. But overall, it takes you like 5 hours to read it, and it's good. And I believe this is actually my second time reading Tom Sawyer, but the first time I was so young, I barely remember it all. While I do recommend most people should read it at some point, it's not going to be one of my favorites. Of the classics I've read, it does not rank super high. All right, so my next on the list is going to be Sword of Destiny. So there will be other Witcher books on this list, but I read Sword of Destiny, and I did not enjoy it as much as The Last Wish. You'll see where The Last Wish ranks on this. But The Last Wish was a reread, and I DNF'd it the first time I read it. Didn't really get what the hype about The Witcher was. And that's mainly due to the Netflix series trying to make The Witcher feel like this broody, dark thing that takes itself way too seriously, when in actuality, The Witcher is a bunch of fairy tale retellings that are like intentionally comedic and goofy. At first I was reading The Last Wish and I was like, okay, this is like kind of funny. And then at a certain point I'm like, oh no, this is like supposed to be funny. It's supposed to be funny. And like there are comedic moments in the Netflix series and in the games, but the books are a lot more comedic. At least The Last Wish was. But the Sword of Destiny was kind of missing that sort of sword and sorcery, fun, comedic fairy tale retelling vibe of The Last Wish. It still had some great stories in here, but it had some stories that kind of missed for me. And overall, it's just it's lower for me than the Last Wish. And then I also want to talk about the Shakespeare play Love's Labour's Lost, which was a really fun and interesting play about these men that like agree not to get married and to be abstinent for a certain period of time. I read it early on in the semester. I believe during one of my lectures. No, I would never do that. But they agree not to marry these women, and they all fall in love. And it's a cute story. Again, not one of my highest Shakespeare plays, but I enjoyed it. I'm glad I read it, and I will be continuing my Shakespeare journey. A little spoiler for later on in the video. All right, so next up we have another classic. We have Mansfield Park by Jane Austen. I read this, I believe I audiobooked it like halfway through the semester. And I loved it. I love almost all the Jane Austen books I've read. I wasn't too hot on Persuasion, and I thought the main character from Northanger Abbey was like not using her noggin. She made some decisions in that book that I still find very odd. Mansfield Park, though, man, this one was really good. I'm questioning why I have it this low. I think I was just looking at everything. Well, I'm going to keep it where it is, but this could fluctuate the more I think on it. What I really love about Mansfield Park is probably my third favorite Jane Austen book. I really love Emma, and it was my first Jane Austen book. I just love it. But Pride and Prejudice is also amazing. And Sense and Sensibility is great, but I probably put this one over Sense and Sensibility because I wasn't getting the story I thought I was. I thought we were getting this young girl who like goes to live with her rich family and realizes that things back home weren't so bad. And we actually got the opposite story. It's, once you leave home, the idealized version of home that you had as a child, that memory that you had, it was never real, so you can never really return back to it. We see this echoed in J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings. Even though the Shire is an idyllic, perfect place in that world, but it's still like the memory of the Shire that Frodo had when he left it, he'll never return to that same Shire. And that proves the same for our main character in Mansfield Park. I'm blanking on her name. I think it's like Patty or something. Worst reviewer ever. Fanny. Yeah, when she returns home, it's not the home she left. Also, this semester, I went to my library and I checked out The Epic of Gilgamesh by Stephen Mitchell. Really fun story. It has withstood the test of time. It is an ancient epic. It was a lot of fun. The Stephen Mitchell translation made it easy to read, easy to understand, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I believe I gave it like 4 stars. And then next up, I read Taming of the Shrew. Now we're getting into Shakespeare plays that I actually really liked. I love Taming of the Shrew. It definitely has some antiquated viewpoints, but it was a really fun story. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was comedic. I thought it was fun. I thought it was raunchy, but also wholesome in some ways. And I liked it. I very much enjoyed it. And then next up we're getting into that 4 to 4.5 star range. And I'm going to talk about Rise of the Ranger by Philip C. Quintrell. So Rise of the Ranger to me is much like Ryan Cahill's Bound and the Broken. It's you've seen this sort of fantasy landscape before. You've seen this sort of plot progression. Though I will say Philip C. Quintrell breathes a little bit more originality into it than someone like Cahill. That being said, I really enjoy Cahill. Like, Cahill is in his bag and he's doing his thing, and I definitely plan to read more Cahill. This is no Cahill slander. But in the vein of like Dragon Rider fantasy, I do think Philip C. Quintrell takes a few more risks than Cahill. But also, I believe in their first book, Cahill's character work is a little bit better, just purely based off the idea that we mostly spend our time with Caitlin Breyer. So in Rise of the Ranger, the viewpoint is split about 12 different ways. So you don't get as strong of characterization as you do with Of Blood and Fire. But for what I look for, I think that both beginnings are very promising, and I wish more people would pick up the Echo Saga. But I do understand the bar for entry is a little bit higher than Of Blood and Fire, just strictly because of the unwieldy amount of POVs. But the more you get into the story, a lot of the POVs intertwine a lot, and all the characters are very distinct. So yeah, I really loved Rise of the Ranger, and it was like a 4.5 for me. Definitely going on with that series. And next up we have, I believe, my first 5-star on the list. And I'm kind of putting it at 5 stars out of spite because everyone reviewed this book so weirdly. And it's The Devils by Joe Abercrombie. I feel like I'm going to get a comment saying like The Devils sucked. And I don't think The Devils sucked. I don't even think The Devils was like mediocre or okay. I gave it 5 stars. I think The Devils is really good. It's just a lot of people went into this expecting The First Law. But if you went in expecting fantasy, Suicide Squad, medieval Europe, that's what it is. Like, I'm very big on, you have to judge an author's work not based on what your own expectations were entering the work. You have to base it on what was he trying to accomplish. And if Suicide Squad and medieval Europe is not your jam, then this book will not be for you. You know, like, even if you are a First Law, Joe Abercrombie mega fan, if the idea of Suicide Squad, I'm not talking about the terrible first movie. We'll go James Gunn Suicide Squad. If James Gunn Suicide Squad, if the TV show Peacemaker set in medieval Europe does not appeal to you, this book will not be for you. But if that idea even sounds somewhat intriguing to you, I think that this book will be a slam dunk for you. So everyone saying that it was not a good book, what they really mean is it was not the book for them. So yeah, I loved The Devils. I gave it 5 stars. It's one of my favorite first Abercrombie books. Like, in terms of like first book in his series, I might give it to a little hatred over this, but I'd put this over The Blade itself. I just got to be honest. I put this over probably all 3 of the first Law books. But I'm not a biggest fan of that first trilogy. I really became a fan in the standalones and the sequel trilogy. All right, and next up we have the book that wins my award for the most redeemed book of the year. We have The Last Wish by Andrzej Sapkowski. I already talked about this with The Sword of Destiny. Little tidbit, I love the fairy tale retelling aspect of it. I enjoyed the bromance between Dandelion and Geralt. So yep, that's why it's ranking so high. And then next up, I'm going to have King John by William Shakespeare. I love his political maneuvering and backstabbery. I think William Shakespeare does it better. He's the one to do it. He invented it. No, I'm kidding. But, he is really good at that. And that's why the Henriade plays are so beloved. That's why Macbeth is so beloved. That's why Richard II, Richard III, which are part of the Henriade. But that's why they're so beloved. That's why Julius Caesar is so beloved, even though I have not gotten to that one yet. That is why Titus Andronicus is so beloved. He's really, 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 really good at that. And while a lot of his romances and comedies are fun, if you've noticed, they rank a little lower for me, and it's usually his more thriller, political, maneuvering, theatrical politics stuff that really hits home for me. And King John is no exception. That is a 5-star read. I loved King John. All right, and next up, another 5-star read, and this one is, depending on when I put this out, either just came out or will be coming out shortly, and that is Dogged by Michael R. Fletcher. So Dogged is a standalone novella novel. It's a pretty massive novella, or a somewhat short novel. So it follows the character Dogged Determination, which is this anthropomorphic hound, and she is trying to solve a mystery, but it takes place in the world of his Obsidian Path series. And you have characters like Crane, who's like this dark demon emperor, but in Dogged he is like a background character. And it's like if you took, like, these books are like the battles between like good and, well, not even good and evil, it's like evil and eviler. But if you take these like giant demigod, demonic, massively hyper powerful characters, and in that backdrop you follow a grunt, that's what Dogged is. And oh man, if you have any curiosity about Dogged, I recommend going to the I'll link it down below, but I believe it was Grimdark magazine that did a reading by, I want to say, I'll definitely mention it down below, but I recommend, it's called The Last War Dog. I recommend listening to that, and if it sounds at all up your alley, I will say Dogged is slightly more comedic than that short story, but in terms of the tone, the prose style, and what Michael R. Fletcher is going for, I think that will be a big indicator of whether or not you'll enjoy Dogged. All right, and next up we have 2 self-pub books. So first is My Father's Land by A.C. Wilson. So I heard about this from friend of the channel, iSamwise. Great channel. If you're not subscribed to him already, you definitely should be. But he recommended this to me. So here's the thing. This book is marketed as a Christian novel. But here's the thing. If you're not Christian, I think there's a lot to enjoy here. In fact, there's definitely some pushback against what would be considered traditional Christian values in this book. He definitely examines things. He shines a light on capitalism and the negative effects of capitalism. And it's never preachy. It's much like Sun Eater. It is showing how powerful faith can be to people of faith, but it's not telling you that you should be a person of faith. You know what I'm saying? And as someone who is not a very devout person, I was worried on how much I would like it. And what I really loved about this book is it felt like Jane Austen meets Tolkien. You have this girl, well, also with Robert Louis Stevenson involved. Like there's definitely felt like Treasure Island, Treasure Planet. Young girl goes out to find treasure, or well, really gets swept along by pirates. But the pacing of the novel kind of slows down in the middle, and we're taken on this very like Jane Austen, think Robin Hobb's Live Ship Traders trilogy, where they're like in the town and you deal with like, it feels very Jane Austen-esque. Like you have like where Malta is like going to the different dances and stuff. It's like that. You see sort of the town life of things. While our main character, Ella, is thinking about how she can find the Gwambi treasure to save her friend. And then next up, and I actually have a read-along discussion on my channel with some great channels about this book. Nerd Level Rising, Nikhil from Shelf Esteem, Dr. Philip Chase, Preacher from Preacher Reads, my good friend iSamwise again, Four Corners of the Page. Oh my gosh, is that everyone? I think that's everyone, and if it's not, I'm sorry. But we read Drowned Kingdom, and this was a blast. I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, though it is not an imperfect 5 out of 5, which everything north of the Devils has been 5 out of 5. Dogged was 5 out of 5. This was 5 out of 5. This is 5 out of 5. What I love about this book is he really shoots for the moon with his prose style, and you can tell that this is his first novel in some bits. Like there's some parts of the book where it's like, okay, that part didn't hit quite as strongly, but I've already started Last of the Atlanteans, and his growth in ability, the fine tuning of his craft is just, it's very impressive. There are awkward moments in the first book where it's like, okay, but like 90% of the prose is insanely well written. And, you know, a lot of people mention this, like, I see a lot of people mention this in the same vein of The Broken Empire, like, oh, the protagonist is a terrible person, but he gets better throughout the books. Othron is not a terrible person. All right, that's my take. I don't think Othron is a terrible person at all. I think he has some really distorted worldviews. He's that kid with a good heart, but he never left his hometown, and his hometown has some backwards ideas. That's what Othron is. Because while he has these wrong, antiquated, bigoted thoughts on people of another race, of women, of people of a different religion, different cultures, when he comes face to face with them, when he's faced with a woman mage that, you know, is trying to get the better of him, he respects her. He doesn't think, oh, well, this woman could never outsmart me. He knows she's capable. He has these thoughts, but he goes, oh, these pagans. But when he actually meets them, that's not how he conducts himself. So he does have these thoughts, these perceptions of the world that have been drilled into him by his father and his brother since a very young age. But he's still, when he comes face to face with these pagans and with these backward savages, he treats with them respectfully. He doesn't underestimate them. I think Othron is given a lot more flack than he deserves. That being said, he's not a perfect character. I hope he grows. I don't think he's a good person. I just don't think he's a terrible person. I think he has goodness in him. And I don't think Othron is, like, I know a lot of people say, like, this is morally grimdark, like Othron is an amoral character. I don't think he's morally upright, but I don't think he's, like, he would be a beacon of virtue in, like, the First Law world, in my opinion. Like, I don't understand why people are so thrown off by Othron, but then you have Prince Jezzel, who is a great character, but he is, like, an asshole. Like, he's even mean to his friends. Like, Othron values the people around him. Now, does he judge his friends' life choices? Yes, and he shouldn't, but he still loves and accepts them anyway. Yeah, what I'm saying is this character's not without faults, but I think he's not as bad as people like to paint him as. And next up, we have something I'm probably going to get a lot of flack for, but next up, I have A Song of Ice and Fire, Book 1, Game of Thrones. I'm rereading this series with the audiobooks by Roy Dotrice, which are, like, kind of great, but kind of bad at the same time. Like, a lot of his young female characters are just very badly voiced, and he makes some weird decisions with the pronunciation at times. But yeah, man, I really love Game of Thrones. I made a joke on the Book Street Boys Discord that, like, Game of Thrones is overrated but still great. And I think overrated is a bit unfair to it. I think Westeros is one of the most well-imagined worlds, though I wouldn't put it up there with, like, Wars of Light and Shadow and Malazan. Personally, I do think it's amazing. My issue is I think that sort of skullduggery world isn't always my vibe, but I do think that these books are more heroic than people give them credit for. I think Tyrion is a good person. I think Ned is a good person. I think Jaime's trying to be a good person, much like the discussion I just had about Drowned Kingdom. I feel like this is kind of lumped in with Grimdark, and it definitely set the stage for Grimdark in a lot of ways, but, like, there's a lot more heroic characters than people give them credit for. It's also way more high fantasy than people give it credit for. Like, the show kind of, like, lowered the fantasy threshold a little bit, but the books they're pretty high fantasy. Like, magic is coming back. So yeah, it was a fun read, 5 out of 5 stars, but I don't think A Song of Ice and Fire will ever be a top 10 series for me. I don't think that this reread will change that, though it's definitely top 20. All right, and next we get to my first Sun Eater book on the list, and that is Dregs of Empire by Christopher Rocchio. This book was awesome. This was the best novella. I loved Queen of Mid-Ashes. I loved The Lesser Devil. This was the best novella, and a big part of that is I'm a huge Lorien Aristides fan. One of my all-time favorite Sun Eater characters ever. I love Lorien Aristides, and you know I can tell that Rocchio loves Lorien, and that's great because us Lorien fans we have it made. And this novella was awesome. And I'd actually say it might be better than some of the mainline Sun Eater books. I'd probably put it over Ashes of Man and Empire of Silence. Probably not over Howling Dark, though. But yeah, I loved Dregs of Empire. And then next up, we're going to talk about one of my new favorite authors after this book, and that is Dan Jones's Essex Dogs. I listened to this on audiobook from my library. Wow, this book was amazing. This book, if you're a fan of Abercrombie, but you don't love the always morally gray characters, you want characters that are a little bit more rootable, imagine like the characters from Band of Brothers. Oh my gosh, this book is so freaking good. He does the boots on the ground stuff that Abercrombie does really well, that Erickson does really well in a historical setting. This is during the reign of Edward the Black. And oh man, it's just awesome. Like, you have historical figures in this book and they feel larger than life, but at the same time, it's these made up characters, these Loveday Fitztalbots, these Scotsman. There's so many characters within the father. Gosh, it's just the story is so full of interesting and powerful characters that take up presence on the page, and they're just a joy to follow. This was a lot better than I thought it was going to be. I thought it would be a fun historical fiction book, and overall I've seen the reviews usually give it like 4 stars max. This was an easy 5 out of 5 stars. I would give it 6 out of 5 if I could. I put it over Game of Thrones. I thought it was amazing, an amazing first book, and I don't know why I haven't read book 2 yet. And my third favorite book over the semester was, man, this was awesome. I'm talking about Once Was Willem by M.R. Carey. This was phenomenal. There's a lot of buzz around Frankenstein right now because of the Guillermo del Toro film on Netflix. This is like Frankenstein, but if the monster was less moody. Once Was Willem, that's the name of the main character. He's not Willem, he is he who once was Willem. Once Was Willem is a lot more self-realized. Gosh, he has such an interesting voice. The way this book is told, the prose is beautiful and gothic in a way, but also modern in a way. It is amazing. It's one of my favorite standalone books I've ever read. It's up there with Master of White Storm by Janie Wirtz. It's up there with Jerusalem by Alan Moore. This is one of my all-time favorite standalone novels. Cannot recommend it enough. It's short, it's sweet. You could read it in less than a week. It is so dang good. If there's any book on this list I want to recommend you read the most, it is this one. I loved Once Was Willem. All right, but it had the misfortune of being read during the same semester that I read These Two Titans. Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's just semantics. It's just irrelevant to mention which is 2, which is 1. But my favorite read of the semester is Shadows Upon Time. I do think that Disquiet was a more cohesive reading experience, and it was a lot more streamlined. But yeah, I don't know. It's got some weird pacing stuff in there. But man, this book is a masterpiece. Not since Crippled God or Assassin's Fate has an author ended a book this incredibly well. I had the honor of meeting Christopher at the gala. He thought my name was Shane again, which is totally understandable. But he signed my book, and it's a blast. And I know a lot of people like to bring up Christopher's books and say, oh, it feels like Dune, it feels like this, it feels like that. Well, how many of those series that you're drawing parallels to had told a cohesive story with this level of allegory, this level of symbolism, this level of cohesive quality throughout the entire narrative? Because I can't think of any that. Now, I haven't read Book of the New Sun, but I see a lot of comparisons to Dune. Dune did not tell its story in its entirety as effectively as Sun Eater. All right. I don't think of a single sci-fi protagonist that has had a journey as impactful as the one we follow Hadrian Marlowe on. It is an absolute triumph of a book. And, you know, I'm sure he'll have his detractors with this book. He takes some risks, and I'll just say that I will not be one of them. So next up, manga. The lowest manga on the totem pole is going to be easily JJK. I mean, there's a lot of fights, curse techniques. I kind of regret getting most of these. I think it's a pretty like okay series. Like, it's not one I would recommend to a lot of people, and I don't regret reading it. I'm in too deep though. It's kind of like where I'm at with Dresden Files. I'm in too deep, but I wouldn't say I enjoy it that much. Next up, we have a massive jump, and that's Hunter x Hunter. This is awesome. This is freaking awesome. This is great. I love this. This is one of my new favorite things. And then we have Frieren Beyond Journey's End. This is awesome. I don't know how many, I mean, I sound like a broken record today. Most of these things I'm giving positive reviews, but if you're being bombarded with schoolwork constantly, you're gonna gravitate towards things that, you know, are that you think are great. And Frieren is great. But I'll tell you what's even better. Mobile Suit freaking Gundam. This is one of my new favorite fictional things ever. Probably my second favorite manga of all time. Loved it. Not since One Piece have I loved a manga this much. This was everything. This was awesome. No notes. 12 volumes of excellence. All right, and now we're going to get into comic books. And with comic books, I know I just joked about JJK. We're actually going to get to two things that I did not enjoy at all, really. Much lower than any of my lowest books. So at the absolute bottom is Dark Knight's Metal by Scott Snyder, Greg Capullo. Best thing I can say about this is the art is amazing, and I think Scott Snyder has a lot of very interesting ideas. This was all over the place. And I'm not a Scott Snyder hater. I read his Batman run. I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was as amazing as everyone says, but I liked it. I know everyone loves Court of Owls. I personally like Zero Year a lot more, but I got why people liked it. It just wasn't for me. This was terrible. And I'm not a very negative person. I did not love this, but I'm still willing to check out more Scott Snyder stuff. Like, I know a lot of people love American Vampire. A lot of people love Absolute Batman. I'm not saying he's a bad writer. I'm saying this was not a great read for me. I did not love it at all. And then next up, and this is probably going to be a huge surprise for a bunch of people, is Sandman by Neil Gaiman. Did not like that at all. Did not like that at all. I will say the dialogue and exposition bubbles were a lot better written than what I found in Dark Knight's Metal, so that's why it ranks higher, but did not like Sandman much. DNF'd it after the second volume. I may go back to it. To me, it felt like a poor replication, a poor clone of Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, which I felt like had a lot more to say and was a lot less macabre and depraved. There's a lot of stuff in Sandman that I just found very uncomfortable. All right, next up we have Absolute Power by Mark Waid and Dan Mora. Great art, fun story, nothing too special. Glad I read it. Wasn't awful, wasn't great. Not the best of Mark Waid. Next up, I just want to shout out Flashpoint by Jeff Johns. Much better event than Dark Knight's Metal. But again, not anything I would recommend to a ton of people. And then next, though I know a lot of people love it, next I'm going to have Invisible Kingdom by Jubilo Wilson, art by Christian Ward and Sal Cipriano. This had a lot of interesting ideas, though I think it kind of lost itself in the second half, but I'm glad I read it. It follows these nuns, None, not Nun, and this merchant for the Lux Corporation, and it's very interesting. There's a lot of alien races. I thought it was pretty cool concepts, pretty good execution. Again, nothing that is going to be like one of the things that I recommend people, like, this isn't the book I'm going to recommend people to get them into comics. But if you're already into comics and sci-fi and space opera stuff, I might recommend it. All right, next up, I'm going to talk about Chris Claremont's X-Men. I read the first omnibus. This is the second omnibus. Yeah, Chris Claremont is the GOAT of X-Men for a reason. I really loved what I've read so far in his run. There are definitely some rough patches in there as he's finding his voice. But, I'm an X-Men fan. I love the X-Men. And there's a reason Chris Claremont is thought of as highly as he is. Next up, this is a writer-artist that I've never even heard of before, but he killed it. Junie Baz, The Boy Wonder. This is awesome. This follows Damian Wayne trying to become Robin and taking cues from the different Robins. So each issue, like, okay, this one he's shadowing Nightwing, the next one he's shadowing Jason Todd, the next one he's shadowing Tim Drake. And it deals with a lot of inheritance, legacy, what it means to follow in the footsteps of someone else. And it does some great character work with Damian. And at first I'm like, okay, this is just like a wacky, fun little Damian story out of continuity. And by the end, I was actually getting teary-eyed a little bit. I'm like, wow, Junie Baz really clutched it up in the second half. He told a very beautiful and poignant story. And then next I have Zatanna Bring Down the House. This was magnificent. The art in this is breathtaking. The character work. So I had read Mariko Tamaki's Supergirl Being Super years ago, and I thought it was not great. I didn't love it, and I thought, okay, Mariko Tamaki is just not an author for me. This was so good that I bought her Batman Omnibus next day. This was so good that I said I may have been wrong, or Supergirl had to have been an outlier because this was too good to just be an outlier. Like there's no way she's a bad author that happened to write a book this good. I think she's a good author, and Supergirl Being Super just wasn't the book for me. I wasn't in the right headspace when I read it, because Zatanna Bring Down the House was magnificent. And in another year, this probably would have been my favorite read of the year. In fact, I'm putting it over another book I'm about to talk about. I think in my original ranking, I had this higher, but I think I might put Zatanna higher. I don't know. But I'm talking about Orion by Walt Simonson. Legendary run by the artist-writer Walt Simonson. He takes the characters of Jack Kirby's Fourth World and tells these very zany, wacky, but also very personal stories with the New Gods. It's magnificent. In fact, these books are both no notes, 10 out of 10, amazing. No notes. They're freaking phenomenal. And then this is getting harder and harder. Wonder Woman Dead Earth by Daniel Warren Johnson. So we have Diana in a dying Earth, Lovecraftian inspired, let me see if I can find the panel for you guys. It is some wacky stuff, man, but it's so well done. I just gotta find the exact panel that paints a picture for what this story looks like. Yeah, this is the type of stuff Wonder Woman Dying Earth is facing, and it's a very powerful story that I think really gets to the heart of what makes Wonder Woman special. Man, this video is getting long. And then so my second favorite comic of the year third favorite is Ram V's Detective Comics. Best Batman story I've ever read. Second favorite, we're getting there. We have The Many Deaths of Layla Starr. Magnificent. Another slam dunk by Ram V. It reminded me a lot of The Seven Moons of Mali Almeida. And not because, one's Sri Lankan, one's Indian, but because of there's definitely an infusion of Hindu culture in both books, but the way it deals with death, mortality, what it means to be alive, and how that the presence of death is a part of life. They both highlight the importance of that, and this book does some really awesome stuff. I definitely will have a review coming out for this soon. And then my number one favorite of the year is The Human Target by Tom King. It's awesome. It's an amazing story about this man who takes on jobs to be a human target, and I really loved it. All right, and finally, if there's anyone sticking around, we got What I Hope to Read this coming semester. So I'm going to start out with the books I'm currently in the middle of. So I just started Last of the Atlanteans today. I also started Grand Conspiracy today. Man, Janie Wirtz's writing is amazing. I know she's the best, but every time I start reading a new Janie book, I'm like, okay, I realize how big the gap is. Like how the best she is in terms of her prose, her imagery, the way she builds a scene. It's masterful stuff. And then I am currently listening on audio to Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. It's my 11th or 12th book by him, and I've loved all of them. This one is no exception. After that, so I'm definitely reading, because I pushed it down so many times, I definitely want to get to it, Destiny's Doom by Von Roycroft. Finish out that trilogy. Beautiful covers. I want to get to No Life Forsaken by Steven Erikson. I want to read Peril's Gate by Janie Wirtz. And Discovery, getting a new audiobook. I'm finally going to read this one. The Great When by Alan Moore. Definitely reading this one. The audiobook, I sampled it and it was really good. And then I want to finish off Michael R. Fletcher's Manifest Illusions trilogy. And I want to read Philip Chase's Standalone While Darkness Gathers. Now, these are maybes. And I feel bad about this one because I pushed it down the road so many times. But by Blood by Salt by J.L. Odom. And The Voice of Fire by Alan Moore. As far as comics and manga, I'll probably just read Hunter x Hunter if I read anything. But I'm currently in the middle of Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil. I'm also in the middle of Chris Claremont's X-Men, which is a massive, massive undertaking. And then I think I just want to balance that out with a little bit of New Gods, so I got Cosmic Odyssey. So yeah, those are all the books, comics, manga I've read and will be reading. And guys, sorry it's been a while since I posted, and peace.